Okay, so I want to next then show you how do we go through and do sample calculations in our report. And so I'm just going to start off where I left off with my other video here on how do you put data tables in. And well, here's what we need to do. I've got my raw data here, and I need to show exactly how I got all these numbers here. Now I can pick one trial. I don't have to do a sample calculation for all the numbers that you see, but maybe I'll pick the first trial. Like you can pick whatever trial you would like, but you only need to show sample calculations for one trial, and we need to do it for every single number that we calculated. So here, I'll kind of maybe go through that again once I've already put in the sample calcs. But let's take a look what I have. Up in this top table here, I've got my raw data. I didn't calculate those. Those were just measured on a scale. And then I actually calculated all these numbers on the bottom. So my data table is going to display all those numbers I calculated. I need to show a sample calculation for how I got this number in trial 1. And I need to show a separate sample calculation for how did I get this number in trial 1. So here we go. Let me see if I can't put those in. And I'm going to use Microsoft Word on the iPad for this. And I prefer Microsoft Word on the computer version, the full version. It just seems a little easier for me, but this way works pretty well too. So when we want to do sample calculations, a couple things to keep in mind. You want to make sure that who's ever reading this can see the difference between the two different sample calculations, or the 3 different or 4 different, or how many you have. You don't want them to all run together so it's hard to tell what's going on. You don't want to be using abbreviations unless it's completely obvious what that is. And we need to include our units and our uncertainties with it. And we need to have what I call a skeleton equation first that shows what's going on. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to get rid of this where it says insert sample calculations, because that was just there as a note for me to get rid of this. So let's just get rid of that and cut, and I guess I'll just give it 2 more. Okay, so I want to put the first sample calculation that shows how did I get the mass of water. So I'm going to first want to type in, maybe in words, what I'm going to get. Mass of water equals, oops, I have it in italics right now, and I'll let you decide whether you want it in italics or not, because sometimes that makes it a little bit easier to tell between the 2 different calculations, sometimes not. So mass of water equals, it was the, I'm going to put in parentheses here, mass of picnometer and plus the water, to show that that's my one number from up in this top of this table. And I need to subtract from that. I'll put a subtraction sign. And so we know that's all one thing. The mass of picnometer. Oops. I wanted to just hit delete, but it's going to, there we go. Okay, so what I have done now is I have put in my skeleton equation. So I can clearly see what's going on. I didn't put abbreviations in. I didn't put a bunch of symbols that are hard to understand what they mean. I've listed what it is. So then the next thing I'm going to do is now actually show it with some numbers and the uncertainties. Maybe I want to indent a little bit here. In fact, I might just do this. I recommend when you're typing in your sample calculations and you use the equation editor, it's going to make things look so much neater and nicer, okay? So I'm going to actually do that from this part on. I'm going to click on the Insert tab, and there's that little pi symbol that has the equation editor. I'm going to put that in, and I need to put in my numbers. So what it was for trial 1 was it's the 43.71 grams. I'm a little bit in the way, so let me move myself. 43.71 grams, so I'll do this. I'll type in equals 43.71 grams. Actually, you know what? I need to put my uncertainty in there. And how I do uncertainty on this equation editor, I just use a plus minus, right? So I'll put in the plus, and I'll just type minus, and it automatically knows to make that symbol for me. And my uncertainty was 0.01 grams, so I'll type that in. 0.01 grams. And then I'm just going to put in the subtraction sign. Oops, it put a period in for me. I don't want that. And now I'm going to type in my other number, which was 19.20 in trial 1. So 19.20, and I'm going to have to do the plus minus, and we'll go 0.01 space grams. And then you know what? I can stay in here and just hit enter. And I'm going to just try to go back to where I was. And if you like, I could do... In fact, you know what? I could even do it this way. I could even go in here and put a space and put equals, and then whatever my value was. And my value looks like it was 24.51. So I'm going to type that in, 24.51 plus minus 0.02 grams. And I've already noticed that I made a mistake in my table from the other day, that this really shouldn't be 0.01 grams. I should fix that. Looks like I was doing it too quickly. Oops, come on, get in there. So that way I'll have that set. Okay, so that's 0.02 grams. So now I've done one sample calculation for that trial to get that 24.51. I don't need to rewrite this again for the 24.55, okay, because that's the second trial, so I only need to do a sample calculation for one of the trials. And whatever trial you pick, I'm going to pick trial 1. You could pick whatever trial that you would like. So that sample calc is in there. And now I need to go through and show, how about my volume of water? How about my volume of water calculation here? Now, by the way, notice what I did here. I've got my units and everything, I've got my uncertainties and everything, and I have my uncertainty and unit on my answer. I do not have to now have a separate line that says 0.01 plus 0.01 equals 0.02 for that. We can assume that someone knows how you got the uncertainty here. And we can be a little bit vague with that. So let me show you what I mean when we get to the volume of the water. So now I'm in here, and I'm just going to, I want to go down a couple lines here, because if you put it right away, it's going to sort of run the two calculations together, and it's going to be somewhat hard to tell what the heck is going on. We really want to make sure that we can see the different calculations of water. So this one is volume of the water. And this time I think what I might do is I'm actually going to use the equation editor for my sample calculation. So let me do that. And this is going to be volume of water. And it equals, I believe this one is the mass of the water over the density of the water. So watch what happens if I do this. If I put in parentheses, mass of water, if I can spell it right, and I use my slash for a dividing thing, and I put density, if I can type, and I hit return. Once I do that, it takes out my parentheses and it already arranges it in a nice format for me, so that way I don't have to try to hit spacebar and move things under, and it looks terrible that way. So here is one way that you can do it, and it'll rearrange it nicely for you. And now, of course, I need to actually type in my numbers. So in this case, I'll do the equal sign right away. And I have to go back and look and see what was my mass of water. It was down here, 24.51. And I'm going to use that plus minus. I just type plus minus, it automatically knows. And this would be 0.02 grams. And I'm going to use my divided key now. And the density of water, I don't really remember what it is, and I'd have to pull up the spreadsheet and stuff, so just bear with me on this. I'm just going to make up a number, okay? So this likely isn't correct, but that's fine for this. Whatever it was, so 0.90, I keep it the wrong thing, 0.9998 or something, 7, fine, good enough. But you should really put in the exact density of water there, and I'll put in grams divided by milliliters, and I'll put this in here. Space. Once I hit the space bar, it already knew how to organize stuff. And if I get my equal sign in there, and then I'm going to put in my number here. It looks like my number is 24.51. And I'm going to put my uncertainty in, plus minus. And you know what? Based on me having that 0.02 wrong, this 0.01 might be wrong. But I'm not really worried about that. Double check, make sure your uncertainties are correct. Let's just assume my 0.01 milliliters is right there. So I'm going to put that in. 0.01 space milliliters. Okay, and then we are done. So there we go. Now we have sample calculations. Now, because that I had to use the equation editor for this, you might consider using it for this original one that I did up here, just to keep the fonts all looking the same, so it doesn't look like things are moving around. The equation editor likes to center everything. I can change that and go home, and I can change this to left, and it'll move it over, and I put the cursor, if I can do it, put the cursor like in the front of this thing here. Come on. We'll see if this works, and I'll try it again. Left. There it goes. If I like that better, I don't know. I mean, it's really up to you how you want to do that. If you think that looks better, so go ahead and sort of play around. Make sure you have an art form. Take a step back and think, how does this look? I kind of liked it better when it was centered. So maybe I'll just hit those and make those go back. And let me see if I can't select all of these. Oop. There we go, and I'm going to click on center. And if I look now, I think that looks much nicer than one of them on the left and one in the center. So it's pretty clear what my sample calcs are. It's pretty clear that I have two separate calculations going on here. I've got all my uncertainties, I got my units. Now remember, the density, we're going to assume that there's really no uncertainty on it. So that's why you don't see me put a plus or minus 0% or anything like that. You could put that in there if you would like, but you don't have to. So anyway, that's kind of how you would do your sample calculations. This is an example where I did the tables, and then I did the sample calcs in the middle, and now I've got a table for what I calculated. And this would be the end of part 1. And then you're going to go through, and then you'd have part 2 to do, and then you're going to want to put your sample calculations in for part 2, and make sure you go ahead and do that as well. So I'm not going to show you that, but it's really the same process. You have to have it so it looks up nice and neat. Doesn't have to be exactly the same way I'm doing it. Maybe you want to bold the stops for each intro calculation here. I've seen people use bullet points. That works fine. Whatever you feel like works well for you, go ahead and do. Now, if you did the table format where it was like all these numbers into one table, then what you would do is you'd have all your sample calculations after it. And that's okay too. I kind of like this layout a little better where I have table calculations and then the actual numbers I get by doing those calculations. I think it looks a little better, easier to follow. But you could have all your numbers, if I had, instead of two separate tables here, if I had all those numbers into one table, then I would just put all my sample calculations after that table, and that would be okay. So there you go. That's how you can go ahead and do your sample calculations. Now you want to make sure you go ahead and do those, so that way we don't have intro done yet. We don't have a procedure, conclusion, and all that. But at least we've got our data placed into the report, and we've got our sample calculations all nice and neat, easy to follow.